This is a male-centered group of women. This friendship looks like a triangle. It looks like a pyramid. And it functions exactly the same way as the patriarchy. Let me teach you how to not be victimized by a friend group like this. This is a power structure that doesn't benefit anybody but the person at the very top by extracting free labor from those at the bottom. So the most surefire way to spot a male-centered friend group or group of women in general is that there will be a quote-unquote alpha in the group. There will be a woman that is sort of at the top of the hierarchy, and the women in the hierarchy are sorted by looks and not by personality or leadership capability. Because if we really take a look at this friend group, the unspoken actual leader of the friend group is Lori. Strongest personality, she has really the strongest opinions. She is the most independent by herself, right? These two other women are married. They both seem to have this idea of like being indebted to their husbands. This is another sign of like a male-centered friend group, right? Like Kate pretty much taken on her husband's like political party affiliation. You know, she's not worried about the way that he votes because he is gonna quote unquote take care of her. And Jacqueline's whole thing is she's married to a younger guy, and all we really know about them as a couple is that he's also an actor and that apparently they can't keep their hands off of each other. Jacqueline's behavior actually seems to cast a lot of doubt on that, but we'll come back to that. So the reason that I'm like implying that Lori's not male-centered is because she has been through a divorce. She was sort of able to unshackle herself from a bad, unsatisfying marriage. She still takes care of her kids, and apparently she was more successful than her husband because she now has to pay him alimony. So she in her own right is kind of the alpha of the group. And when she is like flirting and dancing with Valentine, it's because he's coming on to her, right? She doesn't need to do anything extra. He's like paying her some kind of attention right away. And we don't know why that is, but we know that she's not like losing her mind over it. The whole time Jacqueline is sort of trying to project onto her that like, oh, you should hook up with him, and like, you're the single one, you can do whatever you want, da 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 da. She's like, I don't know, maybe. It's not that important to her that just because she can do it, she will do it. And we come to find out that that is not the case for Jacqueline. So Jacqueline is very male-centered in that she not only overvalues her husband, she also overvalues male attention in general, right? So the moment that her husband stops paying attention to her and like validating her from a male perspective, she needs to immediately fill that void with another man who's going to pay attention to her and like validate her schmexually, because the only person she's actually insecure about is herself, which is crazy because, you know, everyone agrees she's good looking, she's pretty enough to act in Hollywood, but at the same time, she is very male-centered and very, very insecure. The way that she interacts with the men, she is willing to put herself in like danger and unfamiliar situations in order to gain male attention, validation, in order to feel like she's still young, like she's still got it, etc. Kate values male attention by proxy. She's like a church attending woman, right? And she centers men in that way. Goes to men for her morals, etc. And she automatically defers to the friend in the friend group that receives the most male attention. That seems to sort of wield the most power and attention. Now, this is exactly how men sort themselves into categories, except for instead of looks and male attention, they use money or maybe like physical strength. Another telltale sign of a male-centered female friend group is the constant like sort of policing and backstabbing of each other. So if you notice a friend of yours leaves the room, your other friends figure out a way to work the conversation towards discussing their private business or like passing judgment on their choices, etc., rather than like building them up, rather than lifting them up, rather than proceeding as normal and just keep talking about what you were already talking about, and avoid broaching that trust barrier of like, you left the room and we started talking about you, because obviously nobody likes that, including the people who themselves do it. You know, it's one of those universal things, and it takes a lot of, admittedly, takes a lot of self-control and goodwill towards your friends to stick to that in a friend group. But if you can't stick to that in a friend group, chances are your friend group is male centered and it's not benefiting you in any way. And these girls are probably just keeping you around because you represent the lowest rung on the ladder and you allow them to feel quote unquote better about themselves. Even if you don't care about that stuff, like I don't think Lori genuinely is like comparing herself physically to her friends. I think she's okay with aging. Obviously, she can afford to have work done, but she just hasn't. And so, I don't know, but it's very obvious that they are comparing themselves to her in that way. And it's very obvious that she kind of makes them feel, quote unquote, better about themselves. This is another thing that male-centered women do because the only time that your youth really matters is to men. Like, without men, we wouldn't actually care what other women look like, and it wouldn't affect us at all, like personally, in a way that feels like it's creating a lack mentality to have other women look good or bad or whatever. It just wouldn't matter what other women look like because the only time that seems to matter is in terms of how much male attention can it really garner you. I do think that it is going to piss Lori off enough to like make a move on Valentine, maybe in front of Jacqueline. Like, I think she's gonna act out in some way because she's gonna wanna flex on Jacqueline in some other way because she's getting real fed up with this dynamic and she's starting to realize that she's the bottom rung of the ladder. And she's starting to realize that that hasn't changed since high school and that also that Jacqueline only needs to treat her that way because she's insecure about herself, right? She's not insecure about Lori. She's insecure about herself. And so she will do things that damage her relationship, that probably damage her self-esteem, etc. All this in the long run just to get one over on Lori because she feels jealous that the guy that she spent the whole week pushing her towards to hook up with is paying attention to her now. She's like, but he was supposed to want me and I was supposed to like reject him. So now instead of doing that, I'm actually going to like sleep with him. Now, mind you, she's denying that she did that. So again, this comes back to this is only to quell Jacqueline's self-esteem. It's not really to like flex on Lori as much. It's really, it was supposed to be Jacqueline's little secret and she just needed to know that she still had it, that she still had what it took to like bet a man, which by the way, it doesn't take much. Not a sign of some like validation. Men will sleep with anything, mind you. So it's not like some big flex. But she needed to know. She needed to know that she could quote unquote outcompete Lori still. Because that's really where her self-esteem comes from. And really, like I said in the beginning, the most dangerous and sort of extractive thing about Jacqueline is that she is going to use these two for emotional labor and she will pit them against each other. At the end of the day, they're going to end up doing whatever Jacqueline wants to do because she has made sure of that. You know, she paid for this vacation. She's the star. She's always the top dog. And it is going to take a lot for either of these two women to break out of their assigned roles in Jacqueline's little play, her forced little production. She needs to remain at the top for this to work. And she's really, really not a girl's girl. Like, she's not gonna go out of her way to support her friends, make sure her friends have a good time. She's gonna go out of her way to make sure she has a good time and to make sure that it's her insecurities that are put to bed. Because otherwise the voices get too loud in her head, you know, telling her that she's old, she's aging out of the industry, men don't want her anymore. And once again, it is because she's so male-centered that these things matter to her in the first place. As she's always trying to approximate herself to men, that she will forever have to act this way. And she's going to be threatened by younger women, better looking women, richer women, etc. She's even threatened by like older women relating to her or her friends, you know, making light jokes about how they're old or whatever, because that's the one thing that men don't like. You know, women are perfectly fine with older women when there aren't men around. But when you're associated with like older ladies, that's when men don't like you. So really all of her actions point to this insecurity around the male gaze specifically, and she will not be able to help herself but to constantly drag her two friends into this effed up reality of hers. So this brings us back to, this is the same exact structure as the patriarchy because it works by siphoning something as a resource from the people at the bottom. And both of these women are at the bottom of Jacqueline's pyramid. What happens because of that is that these two women will always be unwittingly either fighting for her approval or her attention, right? And so Kate is fighting for her approval, Lori's fighting for her attention. Meanwhile, Jacqueline is existing like in her own little world. And oftentimes these women like Kate and Lori will have like a mother wound. And so they're looking for acceptance or for guidance or for leadership from what they perceive to be a female alpha. When in reality, this is just a male-centered woman who has done everything in her power to approximate herself to men and to the benefits that the patriarchy can provide for her. That's why even though they're on a girls' trip, their conversation usually ends up being about men, or they end up, finding men to hang out with. Because at the end of the day, what matters here is not really their friendship. It's still at the end of the day, it is male approval or some kind of patriarchal, hierarchical structure that all of these women can sort of fall into. Typically, the alpha in this, female, male-centered group will have a lackey, right? Like Kate, who is always going to be striving to like keep the peace. She feels better than Lori, but worse than Jacqueline, right? She's right there in the middle. As the median income of the two, she has the median sort of relationship status, right? While Lori is sort of represents these women's like nightmare, right? She's the single, divorced woman stuck with her kids, stuck paying alimony, stuck trying to make it out there on her own in like New York City with no man, nothing like that. She's aging out in their opinion of the like male gaze, and they really keep her around as like to make them look better, because if she wasn't there, then there would be strife between these two quickly. Lori's like the tension relief, and this is why we see this scene being filmed like over her shoulder and these two women are standing on the same side. Because anytime you try to step out or like break the structure or like call attention to something fucky going on in the structure, it turns against you. This is how the patriarchy works too. And so this is how you can spot a male-centered friend group. I hope this helps. Stay safe out there, ladies. I love you so much. Godspeed.